Welcome to another tutorial for calculus. So in this video, we'll be continue looking at some more examples on limit. So let's start with this example, which says find the limit of 7 minus 7e to the negative x divided by e to the x minus 1. X goes to 0. So what I'm going to do is, as you can see, there is a common factor 7 in the numerator. Just to simplify, I'm going to factor out the 7. So that will leave me with 1 minus e to the negative x divided by e to the x minus 1 as x approaches to 0. Now 7 is a constant. So the limit of a constant times a function is the constant times the limit of the function. So I can factor out the 7. So I will have 1 minus e to the negative x divided by e to the x minus 1. Now note that e to the negative x is nothing but 1 over e to the x. So this will be equal to 7 times the limit of 1 minus 1 over e to the x divided by e to the x minus 1 as x approaches to 0. Now let's find a common denominator of this numerator here. So as you can see, the denominator is e to the x, the denominator here is 1. So which means I need to multiply this guy by e to the x. So this will be 7 times the limit of e to the x over e to the x minus 1 over e to the x, everything divided by e to the x minus 1, so x approaches to 0. So that will be limit of e to the x minus 1 divided by e to the x, everything divided by what? E to the x minus 1 as x approaches to 0. Now, remember, this is a complex fraction. So dividing a fraction means, two fractions means multiplying by the reciprocal of the denominator. So that will be equal to 7 times the limit of e to the x minus 1 over e to the x times 1 over e to the x minus 1. X goes to 0. Now, these two expressions, they cancel out. So that will be equal to 7 times the limit of 1 over e to the x. X goes to 0. So that will be 7. Now, this is an exponential function. So they are defined everywhere. So limit becomes the value. So I'll just plug it. 1 over e to the 0. 7 times e to the 0 is 1. So the final answer will be what? 7. So the limit of 7 minus 7 e to the negative x divided by e to the x minus 1 as x goes to 0 will be 7. Okay, let's see another example. So let's see another example. Very good. The next example is okay. So the next example says find the limit of cos 4x times tan 4x, everything divided by x, x goes to 0. So the first thing that we're gonna do is simplify the expression. As you all know, tan 4x is the same as what? Sine 4x divided by cos 4x. So which means this guy becomes the limit of cos 4x times sine 4x divided by cos 4x, everything divided by x, x goes to 0. Now the cos 4x cancels out, so that will be equal to the limit of sine 4x over x, x goes to 0. Now, be careful here. There is a misunderstanding about sine 4x. Most people, what they do is they will try to factor out the 4 here outside here, but that is absolutely wrong. You cannot factor out that, okay? Yeah, you cannot factor out. So this is like, if you have f of 5x, for example, can you factor out the 5 out? The answer is no. That's not always true. So how do you find this limit? This is what you need to do. Limit of sine 4x over x, x goes to 0. Now, because you have 4x here, I can multiply the denominator by 4. And then I do the same thing for here. 4 over 4 is what? 1. So the whole purpose is I want to have the, what we call it, the domain, the argument here to be same, both in the numerator and denominator, so that we can use this important limit, which says the 3 special limits, which says the limit of sine x over x, if x goes to 0, is what? 1. That's what we are trying to use. Okay, so here 4 is a constant. I can factor out the 4, so that will leave me 4 limit sine 4x divided by 4x, x goes to 0. Now let's use change of variable. So if I say let theta equal to 4x, now what happens if x goes to 0? Look at this guy. If x goes to 0, 4 times x goes to what? 0, right? So what is 4 times x? That is theta. Theta goes to 0. So now this is the same as what? 4 times limit of sine of theta over theta. Theta goes to 0. But this limit, we know it from here, it is 1. 4 times 1. So the answer will be what? 4. All right. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.